What's going on, everyone? Dr. Goku here. Welcome to part 2 of the Dragon Ball Timeline series. Today I'll be explaining the 3 timelines that are part of Dragon Ball Super, and I'm aiming to clear up all of the confusion and answer most, if not all, of your questions. Before we begin, I wanted to give another big shout out to Anti-Metaman on Twitter for his Kanzenshu post. He wrote a very detailed explanation of all of the factors that piece together the different timelines. I highly recommend giving this a read, and I'm going to leave a link to his profile in the video description below. So there are 3 timeline rules that must be understood before going any further into the video. Number 1, time rings and time scrolls are both natural ways of time travel. Time rings are limited by only allowing the user to go into the future and then back. They do not create alternate timelines even if changes are done in the future, while time scrolls will be explained in more details in the final part of this series when we're going to be dealing with Dragon Ball Xenoverse. Now, an example of time rings being used is when Goku and Zamasu travel 1,000 years into the future, where Zamasu killed a barbarian, yet a new time ring was not created because of that. These implications were only relevant in that timeline, and this shows how the gods know exactly how to time travel without causing any distortions throughout the timeline. Number 2, the silver time rings represent the main or the original timeline, and the green time rings represent the altered timelines. And number 3, when a timeline is erased, the time ring will also disappear. Now let's jump right into it. From manga chapter 17, page 9, and anime episode 49, we saw Goku open the time ring box for the first time, and there were 5 time rings. 1 silver ring, or the time ring of the original timeline, and 4 green rings representing all of the new timelines created over the years. I'm going to begin with the easiest timeline to understand, Timeline 5, also called the first alternate timeline. What happened here was some unknown Universe 12 mortal from Timeline 3 invented a time machine and used it to create the first time ring in history. Contrary to what you might be thinking, that mortal wasn't future Trunks. Now, after the Universe 12 Kaioshin found out about the mortal's invention, he confiscated it, so that way the time machine could never be used again. Yet, many years later, Black and Zamasu were able to find this time machine. The reason I didn't cover this timeline in part 1 is because it only becomes relevant to Dragon Ball Super story. Besides, there was no evidence of a 5th timeline throughout the Dragon Ball Z manga or anime either way. In the manga, Goku went on to also state how someone had created a new time ring very recently since he last opened up the ring box. Meanwhile, in the anime, he said a new ring was added just a few years ago. Now that's when they were actually talking about future Trunks without knowing it. To prove that Trunks was that person. Our next timeline begins in Timeline 4, the unseen timeline from part 1 of this series. Zamasu learns about Goku by watching the Universe 6 tournament on GodTube. He goes to Zuno and is taught everything about the Super Dragon Balls, then proceeds to kill Goku and take his time ring. After he gathers the Super Dragon Balls and wishes to switch bodies with Goku, thus transforming him into black, he continues by killing Goku and his family. Now, he needed to escape from Beerus, so Zamasu traveled to a timeline without Beerus, Timeline 2, the future Trunks timeline. The reason that he picked Timeline 2 and thought that it doesn't have a god of destruction is because after Trunks defeated Cell, Babidi and the Bura came to Earth to try and revive Buu. Trunks was able to stop them with the help of Shin's training and achieving Super Saiyan 2, but even with his new powers, Dabura was still able to kill Shin during their fight, which would have also killed Beerus. So with a timeline without Beerus, Black was able to carry out the Zero Mortals plan without any interference. Now, in Timeline 2, Black found future Zamasu, aiding him in killing Gowasu and stealing yet another time ring. They then gathered the Super Dragon Balls, and since Goku died in this timeline from the heart virus, instead of wishing to be switched into Goku's body, future Zamasu wished for immortality instead. Now, future Zamasu's wish for immortality worked precisely with Black's plan, since Zamasu could use his healing powers on Black, thus giving him Zenkai boosts. These Zenkai boosts would then allow Black to figure out more and more about Goku's body, and eventually he would be able to hone its skills for himself. After a year of running away from Black, at last Future Trunks was able to escape from Timeline 2 and travel to Timeline 1, where he was able to warn Goku about Black. After some time, the group of Goku, Vegeta, Beerus, they all traveled to their Gowasu, feeling out Zamasu and Goku even sparring with him. And now the group was able to figure out that Zamasu was actually behind the whole entire plan, so Beerus decided to Hakai him. Now this is exactly when the paradox was splitting the main timeline again into Timeline 1 and Timeline 6, which is also called the former main timeline. This also created a new time ring, and now we have 6 in total. After the heroes got their ass kicked several times and gone back and forth between Timeline 1 and Timeline 2, their only solution left was to ask Zeno for help. Zeno erased Timeline 2 entirely, and subsequently, one of the green time rings was erased as well. Now, even though Black and Zamasu were taken care of in Timeline 2, there was still one timeline left. Now finally everyone was transported back to Timeline 1, and after some time passed, Future Trunks and Mai received permission from Beerus and Whis to travel back to the future before Dabura and Zamasu arrived. They actually ended up splitting the future timeline again into Timeline 2 and Timeline 7, also called the New Future Trunks timeline. Now the former, in this case, Timeline 2, was erased by Zeno, and the latter would now have 2 pairs of Trunks and Mai in that timeline. Whis also ended up traveling to Timeline 7 to wake up that future Beerus early and warn him about what Zamasu plans to do. So Beerus permanently sealed Zamasu away, avoiding any sort of threat from happening in Timeline 7. I'm hoping this video was able to clear up the confusion going around the Dragon Ball Super timelines. If you still do have any questions or realize that I missed something within this video, please comment about it below and I will try to answer it to my best ability. If you have been enjoying this timeline series, please give this video a like and subscribe to my channel for more Dragon Ball content. Thank you guys. Until next time.